The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everybody, welcome to Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here along with my co-host Dan Rylance, and on this edition we're very pleased to be welcoming two people from the local Muslim community. We're going to be discussing the proposed mosque in Oshkosh. We're going to be talking about the Muslim faith as a whole, and just trying to bridge some gaps, get some better understanding on tonight's show. So I'm very pleased to welcome, and I apologize in advance if I screw up any names here. From the Ahmadiyyah Muslim Community, we are welcoming Omar Ahmed. Did I do that all right? And his wife, Razia Rifat.
Perfect.
All right, I get an A. How about that?
Yeah.
First time out, I did it. All right. Anyway, thank you both very much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
You know, and as we talked about when we were setting up the show, we want to break this up into different segments. I think first and foremost, we want to talk about your reason for wanting to have a mosque at the former, well, I'll call it a former Seafeld's funeral home because they don't do too many funerals there anymore, right across the street from Oshkosh West High School. When we're taping this, a week prior, there was a meeting, a neighborhood community meeting that you all held there. So we want to talk about your reasons for wanting the mosque in that particular location, how the neighborhood meeting went and that kind of thing. So, and then we'll get into some of the other things, as well as Muslims for Peace organization that you had said you wanted to talk about as well. So anyway, thank you again for being here. So you have been in the Oshkosh area for about 20 years, haven't you?
Right. The president of our chapter, Khurram Ahmed, who spoke at the public hearing, was the first one to arrive here as a student at UW Oshkosh. And then soon more followed. People got married, had kids, community grew, and now we're at 45 strong. Okay,
well good. And you've been in the past holding prayer meetings and in different types of organizational gatherings. You've held it at First Congregational Church.
We've had a few.
And also in the basement of someone's private home. Where else have you held your different things in the community?
Primarily at the basement of our president of the local chapter, again Khurram Ahmed, the first person who came to Oshkosh, and prayers, meetings. But then when it got to something as big as like a fundraiser or an interfaith, we've had to go to other churches because it works well if you do an interfaith with a church. You can easily get another faith members there. And then besides that, we have done events at the campus on Oshkosh.
Okay.
In Oshkosh.
And also in our public library at Oshkosh Public Library. We had a couple of events, and I think we had one this year and one or two last year too.
Well, and they've got such different size meeting rooms there, so it makes it really nice to be able to accommodate any size group.
Because everyone knows where the library is, and it's easier to
very convenient.
And very convenient too.
Yeah. The idea behind just picking out a public venue is the type of audience you're trying to get. When we do an interfaith event at a church, then it's easy to get church members, and because of their contacts, easy to attract other faiths. When we do an event at the university, we hope to get a different type of a crowd, the students on campus who may not know as much. But again, from the departments of students taking classes with religious studies or philosophy, those always seem interested.
Okay.
And then at the public library, it has its own appeal to certain type of people. We just try to move around and then establish these key points where we can hold meetings.
Well, so 45 members, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot, it's a big crowd for a basement.
It is. It is.
You know, so obviously you need something bigger.
Right.
And how did you happen to, you know, stumble upon Seafeld's funeral home over there on Eagle and Southland?
Right.
Yeah.
So as our president explained at the public hearing, the search had been going on for quite some time as our numbers had grown. But whenever we looked at a property, and we looked at a few this year too, it was either the price wasn't right, the size wasn't right, or we couldn't move in day one. We'd had to make some modifications because our first and foremost use of that property would be to use it as a prayer area. Well, it has to be big enough to fit people in so that they could easily pray. And then also a decent sized place where we can invite outside guests if we want to do interfaith events or just events, public events. We never found the right place, honestly. We never found the right place till this property came along, and then we walked in the door, and there was a few of us that day, I remember, and it's like, oh, this is big, this is good. And then just as we saw more and more of it, the basement, the meeting rooms, just the openness and the community, the school next to it. We had lived there actually, very close to it. We used to live in Westfield Apartments there. So I knew the neighborhood. And then just everything, it seemed like God's hand in it, in fact.
Well, that's good. Now, this is all sort of contingent upon you're getting a conditional use permit from the city. First, it has to go to the Plan Commission and then the Common Council. And we're going to talk about the timetable. It very well may happen that you'll be getting some of those things taken care of before this show airs. But why do you need a conditional use permit?
The property itself, the funeral home today, is in a residential neighborhood. They themselves needed a conditional use of permit to use it as a funeral home. So the property, if it's not going to be residential property, as that's my understanding of it, had to be, you had to obtain use to use it besides, like that, so the funeral home. So if we were buying it as a religious organization, then for us to use it as a place of worship, we needed a permit.
Okay.
But it would be the same residential, or the same zoning that the funeral home currently has, wouldn't it?
Yes, yeah.
That I'm not actually sure about because
I
between
so.
the
Yeah,
funeral
I don't think
home
zoning
and
is
then
changing at all.
but the use of permit is the key thing.
What do you see are the points you have to make in your presentation to the Plan Commission and the Council that would satisfy their requirements to give you a conditional use permit?
Right. When we were filling out the application, there were a few things that it seemed like they would, that had to be satisfied. The use of property, the outside use of the property, which we really don't have much. The traffic in the area, which again, with a community of 13 households, 45 people, that's like 10, 15 cars at the most.
And you have a parking lot, don't you?
And we have a parking lot big enough to accommodate as about
Probably
38
close
cars.
to 30 cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good sized parking.
It's a good sized parking lot. And then the impact on the neighborhood,
Right.
right? That's key, and that's why we had the public hearing to let people know the kind of impact. And those were the things that the Planning Commission would be looking out for in terms of an impact. In terms of the value that we bring, diversity, obviously, we hope that it becomes a positive place where people can meet, and then a good addition to the neighborhood, and hopefully the city too.
I attended your public meeting, and I thought it was very well attended and very well presented.
Thank you.
What were some of the you said part of the criteria was the neighborhood. What were some of the issues that some of the neighbors brought up that you responded to about having the mosque at that particular location?
Right. So when we invited people, the neighbors, and of course the day before there was an article published in the Northwestern, so we got quite a few people there.
Yeah.
From the neighbors' perspective, they just wanted to be sure that that when we come in and pray, it doesn't disturb their peace and quiet. And I think we did a good job explaining that indeed it wouldn't do so, because we come in, we stay there for a short period of time because our prayers really don't run that long. when we meet as a congregation for our Friday sermon, our Friday service, if you will. Then again, it's about only an hour long, and it's not in any peak traffic hours because again, there's a school there. They have daily traffic there. So that wasn't a concern either. So those were the things. They just didn't know when we would be coming in, and what numbers would we come in, and what manner would we be coming in, and how we'd be using the property. Once we explained all that, people, I think, were pretty satisfied.
I think so too. There were some concerns about more activity during the month of Ramadan. And then I think someone facetiously just asked a question where there really would be a call to worship, and your coordinator said, we only do that by phone.
Yeah, because the call for worship is,
true.
when people don't know when to pray.
Yeah.
In these times when communities are farther spread out, and also the call for worship typically is for the immediate neighborhood.
Right.
In that neighborhood, there are no Muslims, so there is no need for a call for worship. We have the prescribed times when we come in. We know the times. We come in, offer our prayers, go home.
And the timings of that mosque would go by the same way that we're using the basement right now. Everybody knows when they're going to get together for the communal prayers. And that's how they're going to use it in the mosque too. They would set times for every prayer that they have to come and use it by that.
There were some questions about whether a mosque would be, if Cheryl and I could go to your mosque, and you answered absolutely, affirmatively.
Absolutely.
And then there was some discussion about whether you could offer some classes, like in Arabic or about the Quran.
Yeah.
Right.
And you were very responsive. You said yes, that would. So it really would be a community center as much as a mosque.
Right.
And that is mainly because we're very interested. We know that as a city, Oshkosh does not have a big population of Muslims, and it would give us a very good platform to give out our message and tell our community what we are about and what we believe and what we stand for. So a mosque will really give us that opportunity to reach out to our communities, to our neighbors, and basically let them know what our values are. And if they have any questions, they're always welcome to just come in.
I think that would be wonderful. In preparation for this program, I went on to Google, and I wanted to find out where the first mosque in the United States was built. This is an unbelievable answer. The first mosque was built in Ross, North Dakota in 1929. That's my home state. But who would believe there to be a mosque in western North Dakota? And the reason is there were Lebanese immigrants who came to western North Dakota, and they built the first mosque.
Actually, I have to correct you on that.
Really? Oh, well, that's good. I mean,
because
correcting Google, but you
sure.
can do me too. That's okay.
The first missionary of our community, when he came to the United States, that was in 1921.
Okay.
And he laid the foundations for the first mosque. I believe there was one in Ohio, but really the first prominent one was pretty close to us in Chicago.
Okay.
It's still standing there. I've been there.
Okay.
It's
Well,
gone through some
this mosque
renovations.
is still in Ross. I'm going
Yeah.
to have to go out when next time I'm home.
So
but,
that was either 1921 or 1922. I don't know the exact date, but definitely earlier than 1929.
Well, I learned something too.
And you can send Google a correction.
Yeah. Wow, well, no, we're not going to use that one again. Good response. I appreciate that.
Well, I want to commend you and your community for holding the neighborhood meeting, because there are a lot of conditional use permits that are applied for in this city, as there are in any
Right.
city. And it's not a requirement of whoever is making application to have a neighborhood meeting or any such thing like that.
Right.
But you offered that olive branch, if you will,
Definitely.
to the neighborhood, and I think that that's really to your credit for
Thank
having
you.
done that.
Because it wasn't the first thing on our mind either, because this is new to us. Buying a property as an organization, we buy homes, but, that's just signing some papers, getting your credit checked, and that's it. But this is something different. We wanted to make sure we did everything by the letter, and then go above and beyond, and make sure we feel we are, the neighbors feel that accommodating to us, and we didn't want to impose ourselves either. And then with just getting the word out there, because we want to make sure that people knew us as a community. So that also went a long ways in doing that.
Sure. Well, and I will just say this. I wasn't able, because I had my own church obligation that night, and I wasn't able to attend the neighborhood meeting. But, Dan and I talked before, and we talked after.
I called her as soon as I got home after the meeting.
And I guess there were about 100 people there.
100 plus.
So,
Yep.
so very well attended.
Yep.
And for the most part, very supportive of,
Yes.
of what you want to do. The one person that I am disappointed in, of course, is the minister from the other church in that neighborhood. You know, he seems to have some concerns about this. He has some concerns about the noise and the traffic issues. And I live 2 blocks from there, and I don't think that there can be anything more noisy or more disruptive from a traffic standpoint than the high school. And I'm not knocking the high school, but there certainly is a lot of noise and traffic that comes from there. And, you know, you've got a relatively small population in your community, and I would suggest that probably his own church congregation is that same size or larger. And I don't know why he's concerned about noise and traffic and such from your mosque any more than he would be from his own church community or the high school or the water park or the skate park or Red Arrow Park or anything that's, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in that area.
Yeah.
Again, Cheryl, I would like to say that this is the first mosque in this area. There hasn't been an established organization or an established building where Muslims could come in and pray. So the concept is new for everyone, and they just don't understand what it will bring out in the future. So just as Dan said that there were questions about calls for prayer, maybe that was one of the concerns that he might have. And again, the basic purpose of our public hearing was to address those concerns, and I think that we did that in a very good way too. And hopefully when we get this mosque, God willing, and start worshiping there and get involved in the community, we hope that we will alleviate any doubts or worries that people have regarding anything. I mean, from our practices to any neighborly concerns that they might have.
A footnote on that, he
Yes.
was at the meeting.
Yes,
He
he was.
And he was introduced by your spokesman, and he declined to say anything. So I kind of assume maybe his concerns were answered
I think
at
so.
that meeting.
And later on, when we were all gathered around for a slice of pizza, we had a good, frank discussion
Okay.
with him, and
Yeah,
he
I
was
sensed that.
actually very receptive. I think
Well,
that
that's
public
good.
hearing went a long
Yeah,
way in
yeah.
addressing his concerns. I think
Yeah.
the way he talked to us, I think we were very encouraged by that, and we hope to build on a
Yeah.
good relationship with that church.
Well, that having been said then, I think that's good.
Yeah.
You know, it's another step in the right direction. Just after 9/11, I was working as a newspaper reporter at the time. That newspaper has since folded, but I went up to I can't even remember what kind of a building it was. It might have been a different church, but there was a Muslim community up in Neenah. And they held a big meeting, and this was big. I mean, it was standing room only.
Okay.
There were a couple hundred people there at least, maybe even more, just to try and, again, bridge understanding. And a friend had gone along with me, and he was so struck too by the peace that you all perpetuate. And so, you know, a little bit later on, I want to kind of get into that, but I think we need to bridge, you know, the gap of understanding.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's why Dan and I wanted to do this show, because, you know, people naturally fear the unknown.
Definitely.
That's
And, you know, and again, that's why I was grateful to you for doing your neighborhood meeting and for coming on this show. You know, by having frank discussions about differences, that's the only way that we are going to bridge that gap of misunderstanding
Right.
and turn it into a bridge of understanding. And so
That is
I-
exactly what we hope to do with this mosque.
Right.
Use it as that platform.
Now, what kind of hours will you have? I mean, we touched on this a little bit, but give us some sense of, you know, a daily schedule or a
Sure.
weekly schedule at this mosque.
Well, I'll give you the schedule that we have these days. Yeah. Now, Muslims are encouraged to offer prayers in congregation, but you know, sometimes schedule doesn't work out. Your work, at work, whatever. So you can say the prayers at your home, at your workplace, wherever, as you see fit. But like this morning, I offered my prayers around 6 o'clock in the morning, which is, you know, so quite a few people. This is again the Midwest. Quite a few people are up at that time. Then the afternoon prayers are around 1 o'clock, and then again at about 4 o'clock. Then the initial evening prayers are right around sunset, which these days is around 6 o'clock. And then the late evening prayers would be around 7:30. So a pretty decent schedule. But those are the obligatory prayers, mandatory prayers that a Muslim is supposed to
Okay.
observe and pray.
At those specific
those
times?
times.
Okay.
Right.
Well, we're going to get you out of here in time for that tonight.
Yeah. And then besides that, this is like a daily schedule. You're following a daily schedule, 5 times a day. Besides that, the Friday afternoon prayer becomes a sermon and a prayer. So like the Sunday service, we have the Friday service. And it's, depending on the person giving the sermon, the prayers are usually the same length, a few minutes.
For me, it's very similar to my Catholic experience. I went to a Catholic college and was in a monastery for 2 years. And your hours of prayer are very similar to the rule of St. Benedict, where the monks come in and the rest of us would come into the church 7 or 8 times a day, almost your exact schedule. And we would have chants go back and forth. But that was a daily ritual that the Benedictine communities
Because
do
every
all over the
faith,
world.
in some shape or form, prayers are at the cornerstone
So
of a
it
faith.
sounds almost
Right.
like the same times.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway.
I didn't know that you were in a monastery. All these years I've known you, and look at you, spring something new on me.
Yeah, well.
Keeping intrigue in a relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now I have to come up with something to, to
Well,
surprise you.
you can write me a note on some secret and give it to me.
I'll try and come up with something for you, Dan. So give us a sense, if you know, of the timetable of this. When will this issue go before the Plan
question.
Commission?
Right. November 2nd is when the Planning Commission meets.
Okay.
That's when they will process our application
Okay.
and talk about it. If all goes well and they approve the application, then a week later it goes to the City Council.
Okay.
That would be a 4 o'clock meeting for the Plan Commission, do you think?
I think that's
Normally?
when they meet,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And of course,
I
the
don't know
City
the exact
Council meets
time.
at
Yeah,
6.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So conceivably, within the next 3 to 4 weeks, this could be
That's good.
a done deal.
Yes.
And then, do you have to make any kinds of, modifications to the building in order to have it suit your purposes? Or would you be able to, as it stands today, just go in and start using it?
I can't really say for sure because I don't know what the Planning Commission, because it's their requirements that have to be fulfilled, and they're keeping the interests of the neighborhood in our interest too. So if they suggest something, then we'll try to incorporate it, absolutely. But the way I see it, I think that property is good. It has everything. It has 2 entrances into that parking lot. It is on a corner, and with the parking lot being that big, I personally don't see any need for any modifications.
Okay, so from your community's standpoint,
Right.
it's good to go just as it is.
Right.
As it is.
Okay.
The neighbors had one concern, and that was the kitchen. And I think your response was that we're not, we're going to bring in food already prepared. We
Right.
might need an oven or something, but there is
Yeah.
no kitchen per se in,
Yes.
in the
No.
facility.
Right.
And so that might be it, but they're not, at this point, they're not interested in.
Right.
At this
making
point,
it-
we're not.
Yeah,
And if
so-
we do decide to build a kitchen, it will obviously be to city codes.
Of course.
We'll of
Right.
course
No,
make
no,
sure
no.
of that.
What they were raising that is.
Yeah, and,
no,
and
I-
if we do decide to have a kitchen there, the most we'll need is what any workroom in an office will
Of
have,
course.
a
Mhm.
microwave, a
Sure.
fridge, that kind of thing, so we can heat our foods and that kind of thing. But we usually make our foods at our own homes. It's much easier.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Anything else on the building?
No, I really think, and I hope people will support them and come to this Plan Commission meeting, which probably be less visible than the council meeting, but this is a wonderful thing, and I think your reception at that public meeting was so good. You have
Yes.
good support, and I just hope this goes through without any controversy. Or
We hope
anything.
so, too.
Because it's not about your faith. It's about a conditional use permit for a community building. I
Well,
mean,
that's the
I
whole
mean,
point.
really, and we have to
you know.
we have to focus on that.
Right.
That's what it is.
And after the public hearing, there were so many people who came up to me and said, "Okay, was this your group who was holding that meeting?" And I said, "Yes,
Yeah.
it was." And we got to know about it afterwards, and we would have been there. And they showed so much support for
Yeah,
us.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
really gratifying to
Yeah.
hear that.
And you did a very good job.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
really, we didn't do much. We just said, hey,
Yeah.
we invited people. The Northwestern got word of it. They basically advertised for us. People came, and some people didn't just come to hear what we were going to say. They came actually in support of us, and they said, we are coming out to support you. And they told us later, we didn't know this about ahead of time.
Yeah.
So it was an astonishing experience.
It went well.
Well, and in addition to, one of my pastors being there, because you have, as we talked about earlier, had, have used our church for some of your meetings and gatherings. And so one of our ministers was there, but also some of our congregation was there in support of you all too. And so I think it's just a matter of people coming together and having an understanding. And that's the key in any kind of relationship when there's differences.
And we can't say enough good things about Carol and Ralph at First Congregational Church, how accommodating they have been of us, and how much, Carol was right, she's probably going to miss us with us not being there, but we'll try to go there and we'll try to have them come over too.
Well, and I'm sure that we'll still, over the years, have you at various services of ours, as you were just a few weeks ago.
But it will just give us a chance to reciprocate that and just allow us to be hosts for once,
Sure, absolutely.
Instead of using other facilities, allowing other people to come in and use our facilities, and that would be a good change.
Right. Well, like Dan said, this is about, this particular issue, anyway, of the building is about a conditional use permit, and that's why we've tried to focus on that. But there is always, as you saw at the meeting, and you folks too, there are concerns about what your faith represents. People fear, I think, Muslims in general, not all people, but some do, because we just don't know. We're ignorant to a lot of things about your faith. And I use the word ignorant not in a bad sense, but just in a sense that we're naive about it, and we've not really taken the time to learn, which is another reason why we wanted to do this show. When we think of Muslims, I think a lot of people think of a violent group of people, a group that perpetuates hate, and we think of 9/11.
Right.
And, you're going to have extremists in any faith, in any race. You can't avoid it.
Right.
But for the most part, the Muslims that I have encountered, they have all been about peace. And we're going to talk about Muslims for Peace a little bit later. But can you talk a little bit about your faith in general? What types of things do you believe? As Christians, we believe one thing, and I don't know how they dovetail or how they differ from the things that you folks believe. So can you kind of give us a little overview of what Muslims, at least from your sect, believe?
Right. We believe that Islam is a religion, but it's also a lifestyle. So, of course, it gives us instructions about how to expand your spirituality, how to attain nearness to God, but it also provides a code of life. And that code of life is basically just common sense. Your conscience. When you do something in your heart, you know if it's right or wrong, your instincts. And Islam is basically all for that, and it advocates for human right in all shapes or forms, for women, for children, for elder people. And as you said, extremists are in every faith, and I cannot speak for them, but I can speak for myself. And our community just goes on, and it's trying now to come out and speak about where we stand, and trying to spread our message as much as we can, so people know that majority of the Muslims, they are for peace, and they believe in peaceful harmony with other religions too.
Okay.
What are the 5 pillars of Islam that we can just review? Because it's used in the literature all the time.
Right.
Can we just review those?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the 5 pillars go by, first of all, declaration and faith, believing in one God. Allah is the Arabic name for God in Islam. The second is prayers, for which we need a mosque. The third is fasting, the month of Ramadan, where Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset.
And that date changes every year because you're on a different calendar.
Right.
We're on a lunar calendar. We go by the moon, which means roughly that 1 year is 355 days long, 10 days shorter than a solar calendar year. So it shifts every year.
Okay.
So this year we celebrated Ramadan during the month of August, from August 10th, I believe,
Yes.
10th or 11th,
Yeah.
up until like September 10th or 11th. So that was the third pillar of
Okay.
Islam.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but.
That's
go ahead.
fine. The fourth is zakat, which means basically giving charity, because that's a big thing in Islam, looking out for the needy, looking for the underprivileged. And the last one is the holy pilgrimage to the house built initially by Abraham in Mecca.
And each member of your faith should try to go there once in a lifetime? Is
If
that
they
correct?
can afford
If
it,
they can afford it.
if they're in good health,
Yeah.
if times are okay, I mean, all those conditions meet, then yes, you should try to get there.
I flew to Muscat in March. We flew out of Chicago, and many of the people on board were Muslim families, doctors from St. Louis and other places, and they were taking their family for the pilgrimage.
Oh, they were?
Oh, yes, and they were so excited the whole time. It
Right.
was unbelievable. And they were going to spend a week or two there where they're going to take classes. Their children were going to go to classes. The one doctor told me that his boy was 11 and he had memorized the Quran. He was so proud of him. So that
Right.
pilgrimage is expensive, but it's very important, isn't it?
It is very important. Like I said earlier, it's obligatory if you can do it
Right.
to do it once.
Right.
Some people do it more than once.
Okay, I want to talk about the book for a second.
Sure.
Can I just?
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
going to interrupt you
No,
now
no,
for a
please
second.
do. I interrupt you.
'Cause no, you interrupted that. But I have a question, and I want to bring it up now before I forget. You mentioned the word Allah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is where my naivete and ignorance kind of comes in. You know, we both worship God. We both believe in God. But Allah is just your name for God.
Yes.
Yes.
Is it the
Indeed.
same God?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, because and that I think is surprising to a lot of people. It surprised me when you just said it, and I think that will surprise a lot of other people too,
Right.
because they seem to think that, you know, in India people are worshiping Buddha and things like that.
Right.
And so I think that that's an important
Right. It's the
point to
same
make.
God that is shared in belief by the Judeo-Christian beliefs. It's the same God that we believe sent Moses, sent Abraham, sent Isaac, Ishmael, sent Jesus, and then Muhammad. He sent prophets, messengers all over the world, because everybody needed, to know about God.
Guidance.
What? Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, and then I'll bring this question
Okay,
up.
so you're monotheistic, just like
Yes.
the Jews and the Christians. One God, not many, huh?
Yes.
Okay, on the book, you only have one book. You know, the Jews have many books, Hebrew, and the Christians have 4 Gospels. But your whole religion is based primarily, if not exclusively, on one book.
On one book, and we believe in the other books too. We
Yes,
believe
I
those
understand
are.
that. Yeah, but
those
this
are-
is
right.
the spelling is used differently, and it's
Yes.
Koran or
It-
QUA/RN. Which do you prefer?
It's an Arabic word, and
Okay.
whatever. I mean, I've heard it.
Yeah.
I've seen it spelled in so many different ways. It's a proper noun.
Yeah, but
I
the
guess.
QARA was probably more. The K, I think, is more anglicized. I think, isn't it?
It's probably, but it's just
Yeah,
how you
okay.
translate that
Yeah.
name
Right.
into English. It doesn't really,
Yeah.
it's still that same book.
I've also read that the book, to really be understood and appreciated, you have to know Arabic. That it has to be read in Arabic, and it has to be read like poetry, because the culture was so rhythmic in there. Is that any?
Not necessarily,
Not necessarily.
actually. It's good to know the Arabic,
Okay.
because to be closest in understanding of the message, it helps to know the native language,
Sure.
right? That's why Arabic is stressed, but a lot of people don't know Arabic.
Yeah.
I know how to read Arabic, but I don't know what it means, so I still need the translation. I go off the translation, really. As far as reading it in a poetic manner, you see that in a lot of faiths. You sing. I wouldn't call it singing, but it's just reciting it in a good, harmonious voice.
The Protestants, of course, went to vernacular when they broke from the Roman Church, and I grew up mumbling Latin.
Yeah.
Because the Catholic Church until Vatican II in the early 60s, our services were all held in Latin. Now they're whatever language of the country where the services. So
Our prayers too are in Arabic, but we don't. Our goal is, when I say our goal is basically the the goal of any faith is, especially Islam, is that you understand what you are praying about, right? So it's important to learn the translation, learn what you're really asking God, and when you read these words, what they really mean. That's why most books, even this one, comes with an English translation, right?
Okay.
Right next to each other. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm just noticing on the screen right now they have, and I typed this in wrong. If someone can just please correct that, it's Muslims for peace, not Muslim for peace. There's more than just one Muslim who wants peace.
That's actually right.
Muslims for peace.
Right.
Yes.
That's actually a campaign
Yes.
by our community.
Yes.
It's not really the name of our community.
Right. But as far as having the topic
Oh,
up
I
there,
see.
Well, you caught that.
Well, I started typing Muslim mosque,
Yeah.
and then it didn't fit on the screen, so I had, with everything else I wanted to say, so I changed it, and I
Sure.
forgot to add the S onto Muslim. So
Mhm.
anyway, if they can just correct that, there we go. Thank you. Okay, you talked about translations and so forth. Now that brings up a question for me. In the Christian faith, we have our Bible has been translated so many different times, and there's so many different versions. What about the Quran? As it gets reprinted over the years, are there different versions of it? Are there different translations of it?
There are different translations, but that's basically just another attempt to do a translation, right? Because translation leads to interpretation. And then, of course, Arabic being like another language, there are words that can be interpreted or translated both ways. So that's why people keep on translating. Then again, it's for the benefit of the community. People take pride in the fact, as a scholarly achievement, as a service to the faith, that they translated this book. Even if somebody has already translated that book, maybe something new comes up. The other thing is, of course, translating it into as many languages as possible. English is a very common language, and it was actually, this one was translated very early on by one of our community members, but these days it's being translated into Chinese, into Turkish, into many languages.
Okay.
But
all
as far as versions are concerned, there is only one version of Quran, the Arabic version. And over 1400 years since this book has been revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to this day there hasn't been a single change, even in a vowel. So the book itself has been preserved over that big amount of period.
See, that's where I think Christianity, and I don't want to get into a debate on Christianity because we'd be here all night, and the Bible, but I think that's where the Bible has gotten into trouble with a lot of people, is it's been translated so many different times, and like you said, translation often leads to interpretation. And I think that's really a good point, because that's why one person can read one Bible and have one interpretation, and someone else can read something from their Bible and have a completely different interpretation.
And that's the advantage of having Arabic still as a spoken language to this day, is that the original text is in Arabic. You can always go back to the original text, which Razi just mentioned has been unchanged for the last 1400 years. If people have a dispute, they can say, hey, this is the Arabic word. They can have an academic discussion about what that means or how to translate it in that context. But that Arabic word will still be there. Those Arabic verses will still be there, just the way they were revealed to Muhammad.
Want to try and get a better understanding of your faith. You mentioned that we all believe in the same God here at this table, and you believe in the other books as well. Where does the Muslim faith differ from Christianity, for example, or and I can only speak about that because I am a Christian, or where does it differ from Judaism? Can you maybe talk about that a little bit? I mean, we can't go into every single thing, of course, we don't have time, but maybe just a general
We can
idea?
probably speak better from the perspective of our community, because even our community is unique among other Muslim communities, our sect is.
Just like in the Christianity
Absolutely.
faith,
Right,
one
absolutely.
Protestant, you've got Lutherans, you've got, Methodists, Baptists, and
Right.
And I think that
So-
point that you're not monolithic, that you're all the same.
Right.
There's Sunnis, there's Shiites,
Right.
and you're a different group. I think that's really important.
Yes.
That,
Right.
that you're not all exactly the same.
Right.
Right.
I mean, we all come in different flavors,
Right,
just like the different.
Yeah.
So the Ahmadiyya Muslim community believes that the Messiah foretold by Prophet Muhammad and by other religions a Messiah that would come in the latter days, has arrived in the person of one man, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, whose picture we have right here. Right? He was born in 1835 in India, and in 1889 the community was founded, and he said he was the Messiah, basically the second coming of Jesus Christ, that was foretold by Muhammad because of his likeness to Jesus Christ in attributes. And then basically it's still, the prophecy fulfilled by Prophet Muhammad.
And you are into your 5th successor now
Yes,
of your
we are.
founder, is that correct?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So it's, in a way, it's almost, I won't say like the papacy, but there is some analogy in that your leader speaks, God speaks through him.
Right. We say that he is, rightly guided is
Okay,
the
rightly
word
guided,
we use,
yeah.
right? And this is nothing new with our community.
Okay.
After Muhammad passed away, they were the papacy. The equivalent of papacy in Islam is caliphate,
Right.
right? And caliphate started after Muhammad passed away by in the form of Abu Bakr was the first Khalifa is the word in Arabic, caliph in English.
Yeah.
And then that continued for many, many years before the Muslims then divided into different groups and,
Right.
and sort of went by the wayside. And
But now, are you Sunni or Shiite, or you don't like
Ahmadiyya,
that? So that's it's
its own sect.
So it's got to be smaller in population
Oh,
to
yes.
the two main branches.
Yes.
Sunnis are what, 90%, and Shiites are 10%?
it's a big percentage.
big
Is
percentage. So
Sunni,
you're-
then the
If we were
Shias.
drawing a diagram, you're not either Sunni or Shiite.
No,
No,
we're
we're
not.
not.
You go directly by yourself,
Right.
Yes.
The Ahmadiyya
Okay.
Muslim Community.
and you're relatively recent in terms of.
Right. 1889 is when
Okay.
our community was founded.
Okay.
One of the things, that has always, I think, struck most Christians, Americans, I shouldn't say Americans because you guys are Americans too, but it has struck, I think, a lot of people who are non-Muslim that there is a difference in how women dress, how women are treated, and so forth. And one of the things, and the reason I asked this is because you didn't want Dan or I to embarrass ourselves tonight, and so before we even started taping, we talked about, and you were kind enough to tell me that, in your faith, men do not shake hands with women,
Right.
and I, as a woman, would not reach out my hand to you, but I did shake your wife's hand,
Right.
and so I found that fascinating. Now, why is that?
Right. I'll let Razi explain that, but before she goes and talks about that, we're not Americans yet. We're in the process of becoming.
Okay,
just
excellent. Well,
in
glad to
place
know
But
where-
many members of your community in
Oh,
Oshkosh
yes.
are
Yes.
Americans.
Yes.
Many are.
Yes, okay.
Islam believes that prevention is better than cure. So in different situations, it has provided us guidelines that we can prevent ourselves from getting into difficult situations. So it's only natural when a man and a woman are in the same company and are in close contact with each other to. It's possible to develop feelings and that kind of thing. So Islam has set out some guidelines. So it's a constant reminder for both of them that God is seeing you and where your limits are, basically. So when I dress this way, I don't feel like my headscarf is holding me back in any way. I have done anything that any other American has done, and I don't feel like it's holding me back in any way. It's just a reminder for myself and the person in front of me that I am practicing modesty.
Okay.
So that's the basic purpose of the hijab or the headscarf that I'm wearing. And as far as the shaking of hands is concerned, that's just another way to eliminate the need for any unnecessary contact between a man and a woman that are not like husband and wife or brother or sister. And So, and when I say unnecessary, I mean I wouldn't shake hand with another man, but when I go to a doctor, I wouldn't make it an issue if the dentist is a man. You know, you can't touch my tooth. You know? So
Especially if you're in a lot of pain.
yeah. So it's a practical religion. So and I know as far as the shaking of hands goes, it's not a big deal to many people, but it's just another reminder for people that this is just another way of keeping modest.
Shaking hands in America, though, is a big deal. I mean, we are a country that handshaking is pretty prominent among our culture.
And I have found out, I just graduated in May from University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and as a business major, I was reminded over and over again that the first time that I walk into a room, my handshake will define me, how confident I am. And I would be so nervous walking into an interview, okay, if this is going to define me, then I'm not getting a job right away. But people are very open-minded, and just as soon as you let them know that this is because I'm not shaking their hand, they would be, okay, that's fine, you know.
Native Americans prefer not to shake hands as well.
And in many cultures, there's different limits on, you know, the human touch.
Of course.
But in Razia's experience and my experience, it's worked out okay. And once we explain to people, they're actually very accepting, and we didn't know, and that's fine.
No, like before we started taping, and your microphone looks like it's coming down, Dan, it's slipping. I didn't do a very good job with that. Just before we started taping, I had to adjust Dan's microphone. Now, in your faith, in your community, would that have been, I didn't touch him per se, but I did, you know, I reached out and I touched his shirt. Would that have been inappropriate, or would that be okay?
I think those are just small practical issues that we really don't make big deals about.
Okay.
And it's open to interpretation.
Yeah.
One group might deem it as inappropriate, but for another group that might be okay.
Okay.
So it's basically where you're coming from.
With what intent?
With what
intentions.
intent you're coming from.
I just intended for people to be able to hear him.
Exactly.
I would like to turn to be a librarian for a second, and I brought two books along that I would just recommend that our viewers might, if they're interested in pursuing the topic. This is a book by Hans Kuhn, who's now almost 90. He's one of the foremost theologians in the world. He's written a book on Judaism and Christianity. This is his third book, which is on Islam. It's a very detailed, but it's very comprehensive. He's very ecumenical. He sees the future being a close relationship between the three monotheistic. So this would be one.
Right.
This is a much simpler read. This is a book called Abraham. And of course, all three monotheistic religions look to Abraham as being the beginning of one God.
Yes.
And so he goes through this in a nice, sort of quiet sort of way, explaining the relationship of the three religions to Abraham. And so anyway, a couple books that you might want to...
Yeah, you showed these books to us
I
before.
did, yeah.
Before
But I
the
had to
start
show
of
them
this.
to her.
Yeah, I haven't read these books, and this is something definitely that I would like to read and see. Like
And I
different
want to get a
opinions
book from
about
you.
Islam
I
from
want to get
other
a book from
authors.
you afterwards too.
Absolutely.
I want you to come.
That's what was so remarkable about the founder of our community, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, that he wrote 80 books because he recognized that in this day and age, that the arguments that you present have to be written arguments. And he wrote 80 books, and as long as we're plugging books in, his book, Philosophy of Teachings of Islam, is a small, probably 100 or 120 pages, and it just does that, explains the philosophy of the teachings of Islam. And if anybody would be interested, we'd be happy to provide a copy there.
Well, speaking of that, once you get your mosque going now, most churches have libraries. Some are more extensive than others. Will you be having various books at your mosque?
Absolutely. And that's another thing that we're very excited about having, is that a mosque will finally give us an opportunity to have
good size library,
and have extra copies of some books. So if anyone just wants to come in and wants a book to read, they can just take it away with them free of charge.
Oh, okay. All right, excellent. Well, did you have anything else before we get into Muslims for Peace?
Well, you go ahead. This is with that, so you go with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you were good enough to bring these pamphlets, Muslims for Peace, and this is, something that is being sponsored by your community?
Yes.
Okay, so it's just your own community's campaign, if you will.
Absolutely.
Okay. Tell us about what it is.
Sure.
What are you doing to spread the word on peace and love rather than
Right.
hatred?
Basically, our community, since day one, we've always shunned violence and advocated peace. And in fact, for the longest time, the motto of our community, how our community was known, was by the simple motto, love for all, hatred for none. And we've always lived by it. And then, in May this year, there was this unfortunate incident, but luckily nobody got hurt when there was a bomb plot in New York with the Pakistani immigrant. So we said, what, this is the time to stand up and say enough is enough. Let's get up, let's tell people that really that our religion, the religion of Islam, stands for peace. Literally it means submit to the will of God, or another translation is peace. So we said, we need to get the word out there, because if we don't speak up, then it's, whatever anybody chooses to believe or chooses to hear, whether it's stereotypes or whether it's listening to news events. So we said we have to get the word out. So we got ourselves some airtime on some talk shows, Fox News, where senior members of our community came out and unequivocally said that, we don't believe in violence, Islam doesn't believe in violence, and you are bound to obey the laws of the country you live in and be a loyal citizen at that. And then we started, we got the idea for developing a simple pamphlet, because we're not trying to, overwhelm anybody with a message which really is just as simple as Muslims for peace. So what we've been doing is, and I've done this myself, is knock on neighbors' doors, go around neighborhoods, and just introduce ourselves and tell the people that we stand for peace.
Mm-hmm. What has the reaction been as you've been knocking on doors? And I hope you haven't had to go out knocking on doors during the campaign season, because we're all getting inundated with politicians banging on our doors and so forth. But what's the reaction been?
Very, very positive. Some people just said, yeah, we know you are for peace, and there are bad people everywhere, and they're always in a teeny tiny number. But we said, but we still needed to get the word out, because if we did not get the word out, then people it would be fair for people to say, where are the peaceful Muslims? Well, we have answered that question now. The peaceful Muslims are living right among you, and now we are trying to make ourselves heard. The reaction has been great. Wherever we've distributed them in public gatherings or even door-to-door, reaction has been very, very good. They appreciate a simple gesture such as this.
And what other things are you doing to promote peace and what your cause is?
Right. What we've been trying to do is get the word out that wherever you live, you're supposed to be loyal to the country you live in. That's number one. That's your top priority. And then live peacefully. Advocate peace. Have good relations with your neighbors in your community. That the mosque is supposed to go a big step in doing that. And then in our community, we've also we've focused on, if you will, having interfaith dialogues with other faiths. Again, the idea is to increase harmony, get to learn more about other people's faith, get them to learn and understand about our faith, and together that should, take us a step closer to mutual harmony.
Well, and you folks have been, maybe not the two of you necessarily, but the Ahmadiyya community has been in Oshkosh, as we talked about at the outset, for 20 years. There have been a lot of things that you've been involved in to help better this community, whether it be something with Father Carr and the Place to Be. What are some of maybe talk a little bit about some of the other things that you've done in this community to move it forward and into a positive direction.
Right. So we believe in participating in the community we live in. Some things that we've done in that respect is helping with food drives, donating the proceeds to either Salvation Army or Father Carr. We don't really care where it goes, as long as we know it's going to someplace where it's going to be of good use. Those are the two places where we've worked with them. This Ramadan, past Ramadan, because Ramadan brings an increased focus on giving. So we did a food drive during Ramadan. We've done blood drives where we've partnered with the organization that comes on campus every month, and we just pick a month during the academic year and we do a blood drive with them. We have adopted a stretch of Highway 21, and the last cleanup was, I think, just only a few weeks ago. And the events at the church, and I believe we've done events at the Christine Ann Center, and
Yes,
Razia
the
can speak
women
more
of our community also try to do some things, just as like women have their own auxiliary in our community.
Really?
So, yeah, so most of the things we do together as a community, but since most of some of the women are not working, they stay at home, so they try to use their time as well as possible working in their communities, and they have volunteered in Christine Ann Domestic Violence Center. They've taken their calls, I believe. They've organized their supplies that people donate and come in. They have also volunteered at Habitat for Humanity, and that was for a short period, but that's what they've done too, and also done some food drives on their own. They've conducted fundraisers. They had a Haiti fundraiser this past March, and then a fundraiser for Pakistani flood this September. So they try to do something all the time.
And
just
last
to participate.
Thanksgiving was the first time, and we hope to do it again, where we adopted a needy family for Thanksgiving. We worked with the county, and then also delivering meals at Thanksgiving time, which the Father Carr Place to Be does that, and we participated. So we just try to be active members of the community.
You're more active than some people I know. I like to do a lot of volunteering in the community, and I think, Dan, you do a fair amount as well. But here you folks are, not from here originally, and you're doing so much more than a lot of people who have been here all their lives. And again, that's to your credit.
And that's what our faith teaches us. That's what the example of Muhammad teaches us, and that's what we share with our other brothers and sisters in faith. When Christians do that, they do that in accordance of their teachings. When other members of faith do that, they do that in accordance with their teachings, and we do the same. In the same boat.
Excellent. Well, we are down to our last minute, and so I just want to thank you both very much for being here, and best of luck with the mosque.
Thank you.
By the time this airs, as we said, they will be in the process of going before the Plan Commission and so forth. And good luck with that. And I would also hope that in trying to have understanding in the community and have more peace, that once this mosque is approved, that there will not be someone out there who vandalizes it or defaces the building. Just, be respectful of their mosque as you would want someone to be respectful of your own personal property. And I would ask the people in the neighboring, in the neighborhood there, to kind of keep a vigilant eye on things, so that if there is something that's amiss, that it can be reported to the local police.
And I hope you have a wonderful grand opening and we can all come to it.
Absolutely.
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 And thank you for having us here and
You're
allowing
entirely
us this
welcome.
platform to just get our message
It's been a
out.
good time.
Yes, it has.
Thank you very much.
Anytime. You're always more than welcome.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for us. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. Until then, keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.
Thank you.